Thank you. Thank you for joining me here. And this is a topic I was told I have 20 minutes to talk about digital sovereignty. We could easily fill the rest of the day. We'll do this in a fast manner, covering the most important bits and pieces when it comes to the whole domain of digital sovereignty, but also in particular what digital sovereignty means to many of our stakeholders and customers and partners, and how we cater to very specific digital sovereignty requirements with the European Sovereign Cloud. But let me not get ahead of myself. Let's have a look at what actually constitutes digital sovereignty. And one challenge when it comes to digital sovereignty is, if I would ask you to define digital sovereignty, and I'm not going to do that in the interest of time, it usually ends up meaning different things to different stakeholders, which is not to say that it's not important, because if you're blocked by digital sovereignty requirements or concerns, you truly are blocked. But then again, coming up with a consolidated definition that many different stakeholders can agree on ends up being fairly tough. So what have we done? I'm a computer scientist by trade with a graduate degree. What we do is, you do subsystem decomposition, right? You look at the challenge, you look at the domain, and then you dissect it, and you look at the constituting parts. And it always ends up being, there is a component, data sovereignty. And data sovereignty you can break down into data residency. Where is my data located at? Where does my data get transferred to? What about my metadata? Operator access restrictions. Who gets to access my data? Am I truly in control? And in the year 2026, 2025, I'd even say for the years before, no one truly in this day and age doubts anymore that you can have a higher security posture with your internet exposed infrastructure in cloud on AWS versus on-prem, especially if you're internet exposed. There are multi-billion-dollar investments, a whole range of security off the cloud and in the cloud mechanisms on AWS that you can utilize to protect your workloads and your data. But in the context of digital sovereignty, the question ends up being, I can protect my workloads against any and everyone, state threat actors, ransomware, cyber vandalism, organized crime on AWS, but can I also protect my data from you as operators? What does that look like? Resilience and survivability also caters to different interpretations. Because when you look at AWS, is AWS resilient? Yeah. We've been catering to customers from 2-people startups to the largest enterprises of most highly regulated industries and public sector entities available. So are we resilient? Yes. But then again, are there maybe different interpretations of resilience that warrant a different approach when it comes to mitigation mechanisms? And then independence and transparency has always been around in terms of a concern or requirement that we back with more than 140 security attestations and adherence to compliance schemes. But then again, what type of transparency and insight do actually national cybersecurity certification agencies require in an environment that is continuously changing? What we talk about is, when we talk about AWS Cloud, that we've been sovereign by design from day one. What that means is AWS was the first cloud provider where from the beginning, you as a customer, or our joint customers if you're a partner, could from day one determine where to place their workloads. If you put your data, let's say in Stockholm or Milan, that data, we call that customer data, it stays there. It doesn't go to another region, not within the EU, not outside of the EU. You choose where you process your data. You choose where you provision your resources, and those resources get operated on based on what you have decided for. Now, importantly, when we deal with digital sovereignty, and with what I said earlier, that it can mean different things to different stakeholders, what becomes key is to truly dive deep with national cybersecurity certification agencies and data protection authorities. This was, a range of my colleagues and myself. We've closed a cooperation agreement with the German national cybersecurity regulator, BSI, which we were very public about in March, which might look like, the start of a relationship, but that's not the case. We've been the first cloud provider that was compliant with C5 in 2017, the first cloud provider, and we've continuously increased the scope of C5 criteria catalog compliance services ever since, and held and updated the compliance scheme ever since. Now, why have we closed a cooperation agreement? What does that mean? Well, in order to be able to dive even deeper into, let's say, proliferating regulation and proliferating concerns, give deep transparency and insights for the regulator in order to ensure that our customers have an easier path to compliance. Now, let's briefly talk about what AWS looks like globally before we then switch to the European Sovereign Cloud. every single AWS region, of which we have 38 today, every single one, consists of at least 3 so-called availability zones. And those availability zones, they're placed so far apart from each other that one catastrophic environmental impact, like for instance Frankfurt. In Frankfurt, the 3 availability zones of that region are placed on different floodplains. So if the river Main ever crosses, ever floods, can't take out the whole region. And every single region is built this way. 3 availability zones. And sometimes people think, well, if you've got 3 or more availability zones per region, we have some that have 6, then you probably have 3 to 6 data centers. That's not the case. We have an order of magnitude more data centers per availability zone. So these are really, really big deployments of infrastructure and services. Now, every single region is built that way. And we cater to the digital sovereignty pledge, not only in terms of how we build those regions, but in terms of services and mitigation mechanisms we offer our customers. We talked about control over the location of data. Cryptographic API signing keys under the control of our customers, those are what you need and what you utilize to determine what can be done with your data. Verifiable control over data access, the ability to encrypt everything, everywhere. And again, we've talked about resilience when we talked about the setup of every single AWS region. That's one perspective. We have more, right? We have more when we assume an infrastructure perspective. AWS regions are the largest type of infrastructure lending that we have. So we have AWS regions, we have the AWS European Sovereign Cloud, but what we also have, and I'll just briefly walk you through that, are AWS local zones that can extend a region outside of that region. We have AWS outposts that customers utilize in terms of hybrid deployments. You can have outpost racks like NASDAQ, for instance, has in their basement, right? Fleets of outpost racks. You can have, a single rack unit or sets of racks. Dedicated local zones like the Singaporean government, AWS AI factories, which we had announced at reInvent last year, EKS hybrid nodes, where you can have managed Kubernetes spanning your on-prem own hardware into an AWS region. And then AWS Outpost Service, EKS Anywhere, Elastic Container Service, or even down to IoT devices. Now, what about the European Sovereign Cloud then? We've talked about regions, we've talked about AWS's global footprint. How is this different? And this is now the key takeaway from this talk. What we have done globally, our regions all have, they have zonal infrastructure, zonal services, region-wide services, but some data services, some services that we utilize have let's say, a global scope. Like for instance, if you have an EC2 virtual machine for your SAP S/4HANA deployment with, let's say, 64 cores of compute, 1 terabyte of RAM, 5 terabytes of block storage, that's a zonal resource. You pick a region, let's say Milan, you pick an availability zone of the 3 in Milan, and your virtual machine lives in that availability zone, as does your data. With some other services, you say, AWS, I don't care about which availability zone, I care about the region. So if I give you 5 terabytes of satellite reconnaissance data, I want that data to be durable with 11 nines of durability, but that data needs to stay in Stockholm. You replicate it all you want across those availability zones and data centers in Stockholm, but it needs to stay in Stockholm. That's a regional resource. Some resources, it's not a bug, it's a feature, are global in nature. Things like how we go about authorization and authentication management, IAM, or usage metering, in order for us to be able to create a consolidated bill if you use Frankfurt, Stockholm, and Tokyo. With the European Sovereign Cloud, that changes because some of our customers say for some of their workloads within the EU in particular, what used to be global artifacts, I can't have that be global anymore. That needs to regionalize to the EU, and that is the European Sovereign Cloud. Your usage metering data, your identity and access management data, the customer-created metadata, all of that is regionalized to the European Union, and that is one of the key pillars of the European Sovereign Cloud. So that's essentially what this slide captures, right? With AWS regions, and this applies globally, customer content, customer data stays where you put it. And those are things like RDS databases, the EC2 example that I shared with you, S3 object storage, but with the European Sovereign Cloud, even the customer-created metadata stays within the partition, the region of your choice, the European Sovereign Cloud in this case. Customer-created metadata examples are listed here. Roles and permissions, resource labels, configurations of AWS resources. So not necessarily customer data, but customer-created metadata. Now, there is more to it, though, because with the European Sovereign Cloud, in order for that customer-created metadata not to leave, we have even regionalized not just the infrastructure, not just the services, the software, but also the operations personnel. So with the European Sovereign Cloud, every single person operating the infrastructure and the software services of the European Sovereign Cloud are EU resident AWS employees who can only assume their operational role while they're physically located in a member state of the EU, by definition under EU jurisdiction and under EU law enforcement access. So full control of operations and support is also regionalized to the EU. And now the governance structure. We've even gone so far that the AWS European Sovereign Cloud Limited Liability Company is under German law. This is a GmbH, a GmbH in Germany, with 2 managing directors under German corporate law. These are Geschäftsführer, with all the liability questions coming with that. And both of them are EU member state citizens. One is my boss, Stefan Israel, a French citizen. The other one is Stefan Höchbauer, an AWS vice president, a German citizen. So there is an advisory board with 5 members, all of them EU member state citizens, 2 of them not affiliated with Amazon beyond their role here, a dedicated security leader, and then 3 daughter companies that control the infrastructure, the operations personnel, and also even the public key cryptography infrastructure that we utilize within the European Sovereign Cloud. So even that is regionalized to the European Sovereign Cloud. So the API, the certificate authority, the root certificates, all of that within the EU. And that, sums up what we've done here, right? Technical control measures, contractual controls and governance, and operational control measures. So we span all of those domains to cater to our customers, proliferating, changing requirements when it comes to digital sovereignty. What I hadn't mentioned, and this is probably the best bracket one can make, this slide and the next one, is, well, what does that mean? Couldn't we have done something smaller for our customers? And the answer is no, because what our customers and partners are asking us for is, you know what, give me something that fulfills all the digital sovereignty requirements I either have now or that might come up in the future, but don't offer me something that is feature limited or that's a lesser cloud than what I expect from Amazon Web Services. So that's what we've done with the European Sovereign Cloud. We've taken what has worked and what so many of our customers rely on and build on in terms of innovative capability, in terms of functionality, in terms of agility, in terms of pricing flexibility, and we have essentially rebuilt it, but this time regionalized to the European Union. And that's why we have this high dynamic of partners who also build and put their trust in us and say, hey, my partner solution is also continuing to be available on AWS because I don't need to do anything different. I build it for AWS with the same services, the same APIs, the same interfaces, and I can deploy it and offer it to my customers on AWS. I'll jump over this in the interest of time, but when you use the search engine of your choice or the generative AI mechanism of your choice, you'll find all kinds of quotes that we have from various EU member state and also global cybersecurity regulators, where we have filled them in early on into our thinking and where they have essentially endorsed the European Sovereign Cloud and how we have gone about those 3 pillars of regionalized infrastructure and software services, regionalized operations and support, and regionalized governance. And the last announcement we've made is how we're extending the European Sovereign Cloud. So the European Sovereign Cloud starts with the full-blown AWS region in January. So it's available now. This is not a future and forward-looking promise. It is available for use now, and we're seeing great interest and uptick from our customers and new customers. But we will extend this with local zones into Portugal, into Belgium, and into the Netherlands. So those will be the extended infrastructure extensions of the European Sovereign Cloud, the first ones, right? I mean, you might already know this. We've been recognized by ISG several times as a leader in digital sovereignty, but this is the most recent run from 2025, the Multi-Public Cloud Services Sovereign Cloud Infrastructure series. So, we remain committed to offering our customers the most advanced set of controls and features available in cloud for sovereignty, and that pretty much should be the end of my talk. So thank you. I think we've stayed in time, and I hope that this whirlwind tour was helpful for you and the European Sovereign Cloud.
Very good, everyone. Big round of applause for Mustafa.
Thank you.